Welcome, everyone. My name is Rhett, and I'm here with my friend Parker, and we want to talk about a 40-day digital fast that we are calling our church family and the student ministries to. And really what that's going to mean is minimizing the use of our digital devices, our tech, our screens, social media, movies, media, all that stuff. And we're really excited to bring this to the church family.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit awkward because it's a conversation about eliminating digital devices, and yet this is being viewed through a digital platform. And so there's a lot of pros and cons to technology and our access to information. And so Rhett, you and I have had lots of conversations about this, just who we are as men and our own, I guess, for lack of a better word, relationship in a sense with technology and devices.
Yeah.
How did this conversation start with you and I? Do you remember?
You know, I think one of the big starting points for us, at least, was this conference that we were sitting in on together, actually streaming online, funny enough.
Of course.
But part of that conference, there was a discussion about youth and parent and adult relationships. And the kids were asked in the study, if you could change one thing about the relationship with your parents, what would it be? And these adolescent age, 13 up through early adulthood, the number one thing they came up with was, I wish my parents would be on their phone less and talk to me more.
That's right.
And I just remember that cutting to my heart deeply in that moment. And also...
What was the park thing?
Oh, yeah. There was also this great example of these kids, I think it might have been in Texas somewhere, but they were given the opportunity to design a dream park. So what would you include? What sort of things would be there? And they were given free rein to make it up, and no cost, no parameters set in place that would limit them. And one of the things they wanted to make sure was in this park, beyond monkey bars or slides or anything like that, was a space for the grown-ups to put their phones, like a locker system at the entrance, so that they couldn't take them in there and be on their phones while their kids were playing around. And again, as a parent, I felt that in that moment. So I don't know, Parker, what about you? Anything come to mind?
I remember those. I remember that conference, sitting in that room, and my first reaction is like, man, like, how am I doing as a dad? I've got an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 2-year-old, and I know you've got your kids. And to me, that was the question that I wanted to talk about more than anything. Is like, just let's pause this and how are we doing as just men? How are we doing in the way that we interact with technology and devices? And fast forward, it's been a couple of years, but the conversations I've had with my oldest daughter, as we were, she was in the Sunday school class this last weekend, and she said that you were going to teach the church how technology and devices are an issue. And she got so excited. She's like, Daddy, I'm so excited that we get to do a better job where when I'm an adult, I don't ever want to have a phone. And I'm like, oh man, like, I don't think I'm doing the worst job in the world, but I know that I'm not doing the best. And so it gets personal really, really, really fast. And I remember even before that conference, there was a season where all of us as pastors together, do you remember the book Irresistible?
Yeah, that was powerful.
I can't remember the author, but it's Irresistible, The Rise of Addictive Technology, I think is what it was called. And we had listened to it together and had conversations, and I remember the introduction to that book, and I talk about it. If high school students are listening to this, then they know that I've had this conversation with them before. Anytime we talk about technology and social media and devices, and because in the introduction, like the header is, don't get high on your own supply. And it's like in the introduction, it talks about this being the cardinal rule of drug dealers. Like, if you're dealing drugs, you don't get high on your own supply. And he used the example of many people who are kind of the front lines tech wizards of our day. This was written, I think, in 2011. And so it was like Steve Jobs would never let his kids have an iPad. He publicly told that to people. He's like, I will never let my kids have an iPad. And it's because he's hired engineers to design it in a way where it's addictive. And I don't know if you know more than I do about the dopamine hits and the way that it's so addictive that
it's definitely a powerful component and built into the structure of companies and the designers of these devices that want nothing more than to gain your attention and hold it for as long as possible, because that's where the money comes from. So
I mean, it's interesting because it could be used for good, but you know, more often than not, it's used in a way to make money or to reshape the way people are thinking. Or and I know we'll at some point talk about that. But.
We'll get into that in a little bit. But I know, you know, you shared a little bit about your own family. I know as a family, this is something I want to grow in. We're not here because we're you know, well advanced in our our ability to monitor media for our kids and the use of our own devices. We're here because I think we both have that same felt need of wanting to do better. And I think that's something we want to invite the church into. You know, I know my kids from a young age knew how to, you know, swipe up on a phone and to open it. And my 2-year-old, he has seen many movies. You know, it's we're not a screen-free household. But whether or not that is beneficial, that's more the question. And sure, you know, we've set up some different ways of doing things at our house, and you know, I'm sure families are coming at this from all sorts of different starting places. So, you know, this isn't in any way meant to make people feel shame or guilt, but it's an invitation into something, I think, something deeper that we could all benefit from.
Yeah. I mean, definitely not experts. And I'm sure the way you approach it in your home is different than the way we do.
Sure.
And I don't think there's one size that fits all, or this is the way. But this idea, where did the idea of like a fast come from? What's the hope with that specifically? Yeah,
no, that's really good. They're a great question as we think about why would we invite the church family to do this and not just do it.
You and me as brothers, like we work together, we get to sit in the office together.
Exactly. You know, and I think for me, it boils down to knowing that when Jesus was asked, you know, what's the greatest commandment? You know, for him, he looked at people as these unique heart, soul, mind, body, complex creatures that are designed for a loving relationship with God and with one another. And I think that's at the core of anybody who wants to follow Jesus, is that deep desire to grow in loving God and loving people. And I think if we're being honest, many of us, our digital devices and our tech use and our media consumption is not taking us deeper into that relationship of love or growing us into people of love, at least not as much as it could be, or in ways that it could. So
it like encroaches on that heart.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, you know, a starting point of why is just we want to be people who grow in following Jesus, and in this unique time and this unique place, you know, for such a time as this, the people we are and the place God has put us. I think this is going to be something that if we can learn to manage and, you know, utilize tools as tools and all those sorts of things, we are going to see such great fruit. And I think there are a lot of areas we'll see fruit.
Yeah. I mean, because I've had many conversations with people that they respond to technology use and devices out of a place of fear. And I love that answer, because it's not just the picture that Jesus has painted for who we are as humans, but it's bigger than fear. Yeah. It's like we don't just react to the culture or to the world around us or hide from everything. Being a monk hasn't always worked.
Yeah.
You know, like we've tried in different times in human history, but there's a way to respond where it's better. And I don't think I know the answer, and I don't think you do either, but the heart to just try to do better, to try to figure this out. And so, I mean, I guess people could splinter in a million different ways after this idea of a fast, but how would you respond to that if someone's like, I'm never going to use my phone again, or I'm going to use it for tools, or... You know, it's a fair question. And I think part of what doing a
a 40-day digital fast. And again, we're calling it a fast. We know it's really more of a time of abstinence from those devices. Fasting really is more food related. But if you think about the way that we consume digital media, it does have a strange, synchronistic relationship with how we fuel our bodies and what we're putting in, what we're dwelling on.
Super interesting.
And so, just want to start by saying, yes, I know technically it's 40-day digital abstinence, but as a call to fast, a call to set apart a specific time to grow in intentionality in relating to God and one another, I do believe that somebody can do this now and see what changes about your life. Give this 40 days as an opportunity, a commitment that you'll make, and allow it to just open up the doors of possibility and imagination of what could life look like if we did things differently. And for some people, that might mean that they never put certain apps back on their phone. It might mean putting their phone away for some or all of certain days, and I wouldn't say that's bad, and it might come under some of our recommended practices at the end, but I would say each person, just like with most things in life, is going to have to navigate, what is God calling me to right now? What is the reality of my life situation, my family dynamic, my work? All those things are going to come into play. And technology itself, like you said, is not the problem. It's not that it can't be used for good and for utility. And I think we've seen lots of great, triumphs and moments of victory and technology being used for good kingdom purposes. So, we don't want to negate that, but we do want to think about recalibrating our relationship to these things and just making sure that the things that we do allow in are beneficial and not, destructive.
Yeah. And you mentioned some recommended practices in the midst, because you remove, you and I had talked at length about screen time stuff. When I was reading Irresistible, we went on a mission trip to the Bay Area. So we're on this long drive from Boise to the Bay. And there's a high school student who's sitting in the passenger seat. Actually, one of the youth leaders. She was 21 or something like that. And she had her headphones in, was listening to music, and I had turned this book on, and at some point she pulls out her headphones and she's like, "Oh, you guys are listening to a book?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's a really great book." And we end up kind of trying to catch her up a little bit on what we had listened to so far. And she's like, "I don't think screens are really that big of a deal. I don't think, I'm not addicted to my phone. I don't spend that much time on my phone." And I was like, I thought that too. And I looked at my screen time. I don't know if you know, this is 2015, 16 or something like that. And I was like, check your daily screen time use. And she pulled up her phone and she's like in front of everybody. She's like, yeah, it's not, I'm like, guess how much you think it's going to be? And she's like, probably about 3 hours max, And it was 8 hours. And the night before, she was on her phone for 10 hours.
Wow.
Because she was editing pictures, because she's a photographer. So she uses her phone for good things, but also it absorbed a whole lot more of her life. And she got beat red. She was embarrassed. She was like, oh my goodness. It was a revelation type moment of wow, I didn't realize what ownership this has over my life. So the recommended practice being kind of replacing that for these 40 days, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we're going to come out with some resources, a handout, and some other communication that will talk more specifically about what exactly we think would be the best starting place. And again, it's all invitational, all optional, but we'll have a pretty thought out way that you can approach these 40 days if you want to join us. But we hope to see lots of fruit. Like I said, we want to grow as these creatures made by the Lord to love Him and love one another. And we also expect that there will be other sorts of things because of that. When we think about digital stuff, technology, addiction, like you mentioned, the amount of digital distraction and the high anxiety right now in our culture, in the youth and beyond. I know many adults, high percentages of our population struggle really deeply with just thoughts of anxiety and depression and all of that. And there are plenty of studies to link, not completely, but to say that there is a connection between, the time we spend on screens and with devices and the amount of anxiety and that sort of part. As a youth leader, as a high school, middle school pastor, have you seen these sort of things be true in your experience?
Yeah. I mean, countless stories, and not very many of them are super exciting. There was earlier this year, or end of last year, there was a string of teen suicides in our valley, and there was an amazing group of people who organized Let's Go Pray on these high school and middle school campuses. And so the youth leaders, we kind of spread out and went to a bunch of different campuses throughout the week. And my question, the times that we were there with students, actually, because there were a couple that were before school, the parents would get together and invite some teachers or whatever. But when there were students there, my question to them on their campus and then at youth group that week was like, what do you guys feel like is driving this? Because suicide it's nothing new, but it is definitely on a different level. And it is, it's devastating the way that it's affecting not just a generation, but suicide is the second leading cause of death for young people. And the first is like accidents, like car accidents or something tragic like that. And it's like, that's intense. That's not a small thing. And their response, and I'm not kidding you, every single student that I talked to, their response immediately was, well, I don't know, but it's probably social media. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
Like, what is it? Because for me and my family, I don't have any social media. I don't use social media, and it's for a lot of different reasons. But because personally, I found like it was not affecting me well. And it was like a time suck. It absorbed all of my time. And I'm like, where did the time go? But for these students to say like, it's affecting the way that I think about myself. It's the way that I view other people. It's the way that I worry now about what other people think about me and all of the details of my life. And I see everyone else's highlight reel of the, stuff that people have talked about for a long time, but it is affecting them to a different degree. And so, I would say it has to be connected. I think it's a piece of the puzzle, but it's a really, really big deal. What would you say are other, maybe in that area too, or other areas, like what would be the benefit of men, women, students, kids being a part of a time where they're like intentionally removing devices, and even for just 40 days?
Yeah. And I love that question because, if you think back to how many hours, for an individual that we may or may not spend on our devices, and take away work and school if you're, a student, and just strip it down to purely like when you're using your phone for personal reasons, or your computer, your tech of whatever sort, is it an hour? Is it 2 hours? Is it 4 hours? The average U.S. adult, I think at this point, is on their phone for over 6 hours a day or something like that. And then, like you said, for students, that number
that's
actually,
for everything. That's not just for
and that
social media or something. It's
exactly
for practical use. And
I'm sure there's some phone calls and text messages, but much of this time is spent doing what these students are doing, which is a lot of scrolling and social media, consuming, video content and all that sort of stuff. But if a student's number is even higher than that, which more often than not it is, in that like 8 or 9 hour window, think about the potential of 9 hours of a person's life a day. If you cleared that away and asked with open hands, like, God, what do you want to do with this time? And just to recalibrate your life in that way, most of the traditional spiritual disciplines that we think about, at church, things like prayer, things like scripture reading, things like worship, or, gathering in community, all of those things are things that could potentially fall into
9 hours.
that gap of time. And maybe have real positive influence in one's relationship with God and with other people.
Yeah.
And again, if that's our deepest desire, it's like, why wouldn't we clear some space for that? I think most of us are already so busy and distracted, but some of that busyness and distraction is self-inflicted. You know, that we are.
It's true.
We're guilty of bringing it on ourselves. And I think for the student or the adult or the kid who may or may not have a lot of decision power in their life on when and when not, I think just the sheer opportunity of time given over to good habits in trying to grow in Christ-likeness, really. I think that's huge for sure.
And some of those good habits that you and I had talked about is it's like, yes, of course, no way to undervalue or to overlook the value of God's word, spending time in prayer. But some of the stuff that we've talked about is also the practical things of like going for a walk with your family and
totally.
Or in just enjoying outside, whether it's cold or hot. Or
I mean, if you think about, I mean, you and I'm a little older than you are, but you know, when I grew up, I spent a lot of time just playing outside. Yeah. And there have been a lot of studies recently that show that many young people spend almost no time outside. Just, you know, aside from traveling or from maybe organized sports. A lot of the people, and I'm sure it applies to most adults too, spend very little time just being out in the beautiful creation that God's made. I think just doing that is one way that the scriptures say that we see the glory of God, right? As we see what he has made, you know, the stars and the
heavens declare.
The heavens, it begs for this this heart posture to come into us to say, wow, you know, I'm outside and I'm just thankful, I'm full of gratitude, and I'm amazed by the power of this amazing creator. And we're missing that many times because we're inside, isolated on devices.
And it's not always just devices. Again, it's like it's a conglomeration of life. But I mean, I bring that up because today we had a prayer meeting, 6:30 in the morning, amazing time. And as I got out to leave, I had to go grab my kids, get them ready for school, bring them down the hill to go to school. Anyways, and I walk out the lobby doors and I look in front of me and there's this beautiful sunrise. And they were singing about like when I don't know, a Phil Wickham song that was talking about a sunrise. And I'm like, Reggie, did you see this? Because he was heading out the other door. And he's like, yeah, it's amazing. And him and I were both like, okay, cool, see you later. And we go jump in our cars and just drive off. And it's like, man, I long to be a man that has like the ability to just go a little bit slower. And I look at my life oftentimes and I diagnose it in a way where I'm like, man, why do I feel so busy? Why do I feel like there's so much to do and not enough time? And I was humbled by somebody recently being like, you know, just a reminder, everybody gets 24 hours a day. Nobody gets more time than the other. It's not just whether you're sleeping, but it's how you're using your time in a day-to-day. And I think for me, I 100% have the reality that I have to confess, like I have allowed my phone use and silly things and good things to encroach in a way in my life that I do not love. I look at it with a sense of disdain and you know, frustration. And so we've talked about a few benefits. Were there any other benefits that were on your mind that you wanted to address specifically?
Something you said, you know, as a dad going to pick up your kids to bring them to school, it made me think of just the relational impact that it can have if somebody were to make some of these changes, you know, whether that's temporarily or ongoing, as husbands, as fathers, as neighbors, as friends and brothers. You know, I think anyone who dedicates some time to take a pause in their use of digital devices and to, you know, go on this journey with us is going to see that they have more windows of opportunity to love whoever they're around. And I think, you know, whether that's finding a cool conversation moment to have with your kids or your spouse, or young people growing in friendship with their peers, I think that's in many ways something that's been lost over the last few decades is just the ability to have friends, you know, close friends that we can talk to face and be people who love one another. I don't know if you've seen much of that in the youth world, but
yeah.
There's,
I don't know how much time we want to spend on that particular topic, because that's something that, parents ask me all the time. I see the wrestling within the hearts of students. This is not a blast on a generational thing. This isn't just young people. This is adults. This is me and my life. Like, I've lost the art of knowing what a friendship looks like. And it comes down to, oftentimes friendship revolves around investment and a mutual respect. And when you don't feel like you have the time to invest, then it doesn't just naturally blossom and you have this really deep, vibrant friendship. But a lot of people, young people, old people, that I've been around, there's a wrestling with, how do I, why do I feel like I don't have any friends? Why do I feel so isolated in this world? And that adds to the dimension. Again, I don't think it's all based on devices, but there definitely is a connection.
Yeah, it's a component
that is a lot stronger than I think I'm willing to give credit to in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Well, for all those reasons, maybe we should talk about who are we inviting to join us? Because, it said this is for student ministries, this is for the church family, but who specifically would benefit from this? And I want to start by saying, even though this is a student ministry thing, that you and I are kind of putting on, I think it starts with the adults.
Yeah.
If you want to see kids formed into loving people who follow after Jesus, and you want their lives to reflect, healthy boundaries and use of digital stuff for good and not for, the detriment of their bodies and their minds and their souls, then I think it has to be modeled first, right? So I'm like saying that to you and I, as dads, that we shouldn't expect our kids to live in a way that we ourselves are unwilling to take on. And so this is an invitation to parents and guardians, but really to everybody. I think I would love for this to be spread around the whole church and for everybody to get in there.
Because what did you say about at the very beginning, the conference we were listening into, the longing of kids is to spend more time with their family, is to have conversations. And it's a lot easier just to turn on a show. Yeah. And when you're tired, when you're worn out from the day. And so I think it has to be modeled. It has to be something that we take serious and are willing to, like every other area of our life that seems to violate our intimacy with Christ or our ability to love somebody. If it's bitterness, you have to fight against it. It's not something that just passively goes away. Time does not heal all wounds. It has to be a battle that you're willing to fight. And I think it has to start with us. So whether it is a high school student or a young kid, it starts with who we are as individuals wherever we are in our season. But if we have children, I think it has to start with us, which really kind of sucks, actually. I'd hope that they would figure it out and then be able to live free from the distractions. But
I wish it were that way. But I know, just speaking on behalf of the many kids I get to interact with, whether they've articulated it to the adults in their life or not, they would love to spend more time interacting relationally with their family and less time themselves on screens even, as well as seeing their parents on screens. That, funny or not funny, I asked kids if they often see their parents distracted, just looking down at their phones, and they, the hands shot up real fast. And the kids, I think, notice more than we think they do. And so this is an invitation, parents, guardians, adults.
That's convicting. It's real.
Park, what about for the youth? I know this is a huge part of their culture and their lifestyle. Do you think they can do this, and would they benefit from it?
I think 100% they can do it. It's like anything else. It's which desire are you going to feed more, and which is going to actually be more important to you. And it's going to be a challenge, because this is really, I hope this doesn't get over spiritualized in this idea, but this is a call to holiness, because in every other area of our life, our hope as followers of Jesus is not just to stand out, but is because we are called to live a different life. Yeah. And if our motivation is not just, I'm afraid of what devices will do to lead me to a place of anxiety or whatever, If it's something greater to where it's this desire, I want to live more in harmony with God and other people, and this might be a stumbling block in that way. This might be causing a little bit too much time or whatever it is, then we have to be willing to say, this is something I'm going to take a stand on. And I think it starts with modeling, but I think a middle school student, a high school student, they are 100% capable. I think just like the rest of us, they need some encouragement and they need some accountability, not in the sense, accountability works as well as we let it work. It's like, if you want to lie to me about something, then you can lie to me about something. It's like accountability only goes as far as we're willing to let it. But I think the beauty is if we were willing to do this together. And when I think of middle school, high school ministry, I think of like ministry starts in their worlds with being invited into it and then going with somebody. It's not necessarily just watching somebody else do it, but being there with other people and doing it together, because they need the constant encouragement and the reminder of what's actually greater. What's the more valuable thing here? When all of their friends all day long are talking about things that they saw on social media, or it can leave, or you're not allowed to have that social media platform, and so you feel disconnected. It's a weird world we live in. So to answer the question in short, yes, they are 100% capable. I think like all of us, we need encouragement, and we need the reminder that we're doing this together for a purpose greater than we're just afraid.
Yeah. And maybe this is a great place to say one of the reasons why it would be beneficial to join us this specific time during this 40-day fast, and not just to try to do it on your own as a family at some other point in the year, is because of that togetherness that you were referencing. I think there's something powerful in doing something challenging with other people. And yes, it is accountability, but it's also just camaraderie and growth, and being able to share stories with one another, to sympathize with one another. I think that's so powerful. And I love that for the kids also. So we talked about, grown-ups, and for middle school, high school.
Tell me about the kids.
But not calling just the grown-ups to take a break from their screens, but also for the kids to seriously consider minimizing their use of screens and devices during this time. And I know some kids, that's not going to be an issue. They're excited about it. It'll be a fun thing for them. I know other kids, it'll be a huge shift in how they spend their free time. Some of the things they're most passionate about might be video games or, YouTube creators that they love. But I think we can find some really amazing other things that might be able to replace what currently to them seems like such a a treat. We can find other amazing gifts of God, through relationship, through nature, through the activities and just imagination that God's given us. I think we need to reclaim that a little bit.
Amen.
And so the kids are invited, babies all the way up. So this is not a one age or another thing.
That's so awesome. I was talking to our 6th grade neighbor a couple days ago, and she's like, my little brother, he's so goofy and he's so weird. He's always like thinking of random things, and I'm like, yeah, but imagination is good, isn't it? And she's like, well, yeah, I just feel like sometimes I get embarrassed when I want to play pretend, or I want to, and it's interesting how our world has reshaped that. And there's a beautiful quote from C.S. Lewis, who says, like, when I got older, I realized that imagination is actually like it's good. I'm old enough now to read fairy tales again. It's something along the lines of what he said. But anyways, all that to say is there's a lot of beauty that could come from us being willing to take an intentional step together and say, hey, I'm doing this as a family, like our family collectively, your family. Can we go for a walk? I mean, there is a benefit in this time of year because spring is here.
Yeah.
It's like there's the practical, the beauty of outside is a little bit easier to access. And so can you remind everybody again, when are we doing this?
Yeah.
The specific time block.
Yeah. And, my hope is that this won't be the only time we do this, but this year our plan is to start 10 days after Easter, which is April 10th, and go for 40 days up through Pentecost Sunday, which happens to be May 19th, I believe. So April 10th to May 19th, we're going to be doing this set aside, 40-day digital fast. And then we can, like you said, do it together and reevaluate afterwards and have, what worked, what didn't work, how can we reshape our lives now, with these new, windows to see into a different world, world that doesn't completely revolve around all of our tech and digital stuff.
Oh man. And we've got a little piece of paper coming out with some practical stuff on like, in the vacuum of time that now you may experience.
Yes, exactly.
Here's this, or it's okay to watch a movie, but be intentional, invite friends over, do it together instead of just turning it on. So that's going to be in a little piece of paper, and maybe we'll sit down again together.
I think you and I will have another conversation, and we'll work through some of just that nitty gritty details of how can I do this and what would it look like for my family? What are some recommended practices? And I think we'll have that handout available for people, as well as hopefully, another conversation between you and I. And, again, we are not doctors, we're not therapists, we're not psychologists, we're not expert statisticians or anything like that. We are simply responding to what I think is the discernment that God's given us about the day and age we live in, and just asking questions and inviting people to something. So again, everything is optional, invitational, but I do think that if you decide to join us on this 40-day digital fast, you will be amazed at what God could do during that time. So, Park, I'm excited about it. Yeah. I think you're excited about it.
I really, really am. I need the brotherhood in this, I'm very excited, very excited.
Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for taking the time to listen, and we'll get back to you again sometime soon.
Awesome. Thank you guys.